Hello and welcome to Parallels in Pictures. I'm your host, Joe Cooper, and these are what we consider to be the very best films in 2024. It's a wonderful time of year for the movies. Awards season. Now we're just a couple days away from the 97th Annual Academy Awards. In the years since the pandemic, the phrase, "the movies are back," became popular in the media, suggesting that the world's greatest art form had somehow receded and then reemerged. It's easy to forget that we had Tenet in 2020, the first summer of the pandemic. 2021, we had The Green Knight, also No Time to Die, and Summer of Soul. 2022, we had Top Gun Maverick, Nope, 20 Days in Mariupol, and the list goes on. The movies never went anywhere. The writers' strike didn't lead to a cinema desert. Hollywood is not completely broken. While it may be extremely difficult for films to get made, and the last few years have brought specifically unique challenges, it's never exactly been easy. Walking back 100 years, we could review the Great Depression, the Hays Code, World War II, McCarthyism and blacklisting, the great studio system shift, the seismic emergence of a new Hollywood, the corporatization of the industry, 9/11, the arrival of the digital age, the 2008 financial crisis, the streaming wars, the pandemic, and now just generally the global polycrisis environment in which we all live. During every one of these eras, exceptional movies were made. The increasingly force-reckoning director Ava DuVernay has said this about timing: "Don't wait for permission to do something creative." The singular director Sean Baker said this about genre: "He thought he'd make action movies, but instead found himself falling in love with personal cinema." And legendary DP Roger Deakins said this about planning ahead: "Things usually work out better than you plan." These ideas speak to the unknowability of the future, the absence of a roadmap for the creation of art, and the always available but easily forgettable truth that all is not lost, despite how we might feel about the times in which we live or the languishing state in which we might find our dreams. Films are history. They mark us where we find them and serve as postcards from the past. Here are a few films and moments that stand out from the past year, and in the spirit of keeping the rich history of cinema alive, we offer a parallel film for each that offers curiosity and context to these choices. They all carry with them the reminder that great work is being created every day, and the promise of even more wonderful stories to come will never die. First up, the gentlest and most nuanced performance by an actor, Sebastian Stan in A Different Man. In this unusual fable, Stan plays an actor living with neurofibromatosis, which causes tumors to grow along the nervous system and can result in facial deformities. He agrees to a radical medical treatment that restores his face, and then meets another man with the exact same condition. When the film came out, many were quick to praise the performance of Adam Pearson, the supporting male lead, and an actor who actually has neurofibromatosis. He was last memorably seen in Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin from 2013, where he bears a bit more than just his face. But it's Stan who truly shines, having shed his bulk from playing Bucky for Marvel and tiptoeing around other people as if trying to minimize his own shadow. He does more with his neck and shoulders than many do with their whole body, belying a fragility and small sense of worth with which he's lived his whole life. When his face is restored and his real estate career climbs, a colleague gestures at a cardboard cutout of him and says, "Look at this piece of man candy." You can feel his insides cave in. Stan also won acclaim for his turn as Trump on The Apprentice. Both are curious tales of identity, normality, and possibility, and show his incredible range, which we're hopefully just discovering. And a great companion piece to A Different Man is the 1980 classic The Elephant Man, featuring show-stopping performances by both Anthony Hopkins and the inimitable John Hurt as a disfigured man that catches the interest of a doctor and academic. It's directed by none other than David Lynch, whose recent passing provides another poignant reason to revisit this classic. Best moment of sweet comedic relief: Will and Harper. While the film Saturday Night satisfied some fans of the storied sketch show, it's this film, about former SNL writer Harper Steele and her journey of transformation in her early 60s, that offers more to think about. The film captures parallel experiences, Steele's resolve, vulnerability, and bravery, and her longtime buddy Will Ferrell's awkwardness and open willingness to learn about his friend and her journey. First you might think, what's the big deal? It's 2024, of course Will Ferrell is liberal and progressive. But then we recall that Ferrell was the king of the bro comedies, and we watch as he sits in discomfort at the difficult questions facing his friend and their relationship. This frank tension continues, and the film does a great job at resisting the temptation to show us too much of Farrell's natural everyday comedy. That tension builds, and then they finally take a hot air balloon ride with their fellow SNL alum Will Forte, and there's a burst of improvised comedy as they pass over a neighborhood that had me howling. And in that way, the film is like life: odd, difficult, and sometimes a blast. For another unlikely buddy comedy that toys with gender roles, Billy Wilder's smash hit Some Like It Hot from 1959 is always an excellent rewatch. It finds Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis hamming it up as musicians in a ladies' band, swirling around one of the original and scene-stealing bombshells herself, Marilyn Monroe. Best jokes and insights about parenting? The Wild Robot. Parenting is one of life's ultimate adventures. You figure it out is one of the core messages about it in this story of a service robot looking for a job on an environmentally advanced Earth. It's full of great bits, and one of the strongest is how a mother possum, played perfectly by Catherine O'Hara, teaches her children, called Joeys, by the way, just like kangaroos, to play dead to avoid predators. She has 7, which would be enough to drive any parent mad. After a calamity, she thinks she's lost one, but reappear the Joey does, exclaiming, "Mom, I'm still alive!" And all she can muster is a croaky, "Yay!" DreamWorks Animation, while creating successful franchises, is generally known more for Shrek and Kung Fu Panda than for powerful original stories. This marks an enormous leap forward, not only in technical animation, but in rich storytelling for all ages. And the orchestral score by Chris Bowers will have you out of your seat. And if you have a heart, bring Kleenex. A few moments of this film reminded me of Diane Keaton's turn as a surprise mom in Charles Shire's Baby Boom from 1987, a great gem amongst 80s dramedies, pairing our queen of charming neuroses with steadfast supporters like Harold Ramis and Sam Shepard. And now, the best hero's journey? Flow. One of this year's sleeper hits in the Oscars race is a little animated feature from the country of Latvia, and it's nothing short of a masterpiece. My first thought was about the animation style. The corners were kind of blurred, leaves and creatures seemed kind of blockish, but it's simply a different kind of animation, a mix of hand-drawn and 2D that looks and feels markedly different from the high gloss we've been treated to thanks to lightspeed advances in tech. And my second thought was that it feels kind of like heaven. The combination of the imagery, indefinite, rich, textured, with a magnificent orchestral score, and the total absence of dialogue and humans, transports you to a different realm. The world is flooding, and human life is nowhere to be found. Animals of all kinds flee the flood, and a ragtag band of buddies forms, complete with a capybara, you'll recognize him, a dog, a noble secretary bird, and the vulnerable, anonymous black cat at the center of this Odyssean journey. Might seem like a wild left turn from this gentle journey of 2- and 4-legged friends, but consider revisiting The African Queen from 1951, with a frazzled Katharine Hepburn and a grizzled Humphrey Bogart as a drunken steamboat captain. Picture these two with director John Huston sipping evening cocktails during a grueling shoot for a film that would go on to win Bogey a long-awaited Oscar. Now we turn to the best mythological prequel with David Lean Vistas, Furiosa. Mad Max Fury Road from 2015 was acclaimed for its unparalleled action and efficient storytelling. George Miller called it a chase and a race. Furiosa did not engage quite as big of an audience, but there's still plenty to marvel at, like the shift to mythological storytelling and more patient pacing between set pieces. One scene I always love to rewind and watch again is when Dementus and his horde of hundreds on motorbikes make their way to the Citadel around 28 minutes in. The pack moves like a swarm of bees, and we watch from height and distance as they curve along the ground around staggering buttes and rocky outcroppings. It's a great role for Chris Hemsworth, giving him much more to do than his superhero parts, and allowing a bit of desert Shakespeare to peek through. In a pivotal scene, he admonishes 2 of our protagonists, screaming, "There is no hope!" from behind his gnarled beard. David Lean might have captured the desert unforgettably in his storied masterpiece Lawrence of Arabia from 1962, but few since him have rendered it like Miller does in this more than worthy installment into the franchise. Lean's masterpiece is a great pairing with this modern epic, and it's easy to see why its groundbreaking filmmaking garnered 10 Oscar nominations and 7 wins for that 1962 old Hollywood classic. Now for the best genre perfection, Dune Part 2. When I walked out of the theater after the second chapter in Denis Villeneuve's Dune trilogy, I thought, he's just done for science fiction what Ridley Scott did for it in Alien in 1979. These are two pivotal moments when genre was perfected and elevated. Bizarre, non-human worlds, sagas spanning millennia, inventive costumes, incredible sound design, it instantly became part of the culture, moving from must-see in theaters to late-night comfort watch among many. When Stellan Skarsgård's bulky Baron growls the word genius, he could be describing Villeneuve to a T. From the minimalist iconography of the black-armored Harkonnen scaling burnt orange sands, to the soaring Zimmer rock score that accompanies the Sandworm roller coaster ride, every feature and sequence are memorable, making the next question impossible to answer. How will Villeneuve and the team top it in Part 3? Power over good endings is power over all. And if you haven't seen or rewatched 1979's Alien, it's worth revisiting for its innovation in creature effects and production design, not to mention a stellar cast, especially in an era when Alien franchise reboots are more common than chest bursters on the Nostromo. Now for the most emotionally devastating. A small film called Norman. Director Gabrielle Blackwood's stunning family documentary made its way around small festivals in 2024, but still doesn't have distribution. So it goes for most independent films these days. Luckily, the full film is available on YouTube. Its premise alone induces chills. In Jamaica, a child witnesses the murder of his mother by his father. Cut to 30 years later, in Norman, now married and raising 4 daughters, journeys back to Jamaica to meet his father, whom he hasn't seen since the tragedy. Anyone looking for a blistering example of modern male vulnerability should look no further. It's definitely the film at which I wept the hardest last year. It's a personal and human journey for truth and redemption, and whether they're even attainable. For another deeply human story about parent-child relationships and another bona fide tearjerker, remember James L. Brooks' Oscar-winning Terms of Endearment from 1983, for the powerful mother-daughter dynamic, and also for the welcome comic relief provided by a zany Jack Nicholson at the height of his Hollywood antics. The most wrenchingly essential, Zurawski versus Texas. The maternal mortality rate in Texas has risen 12% since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which is after the 56% it rose during the pandemic. An abortion in Texas is legal only upon a life-threatening condition aggravated by, caused by, or arising from a pregnancy. So you wait for the mother's life to be in danger, and then it's okay. Zurawski vs. Texas is produced in part by Hillary Clinton, Chelsea Clinton, and Jennifer Lawrence, and it tells the story of a number of women in Texas from different backgrounds who join a lawsuit brought by the Center for Reproductive Rights against the state of Texas for denial of abortion care and its devastating effects. These stories are so powerful, even this kids-free bachelor with very little to relate to was consumed by the plight of women striving to make the most basic decisions about their own health and receive life-changing and sometimes saving care. Crucial but difficult stories like these often leave us devastated. So for an inspiring story about a woman fighting for her family in conditions also out of her control, consider William Wyler's wartime epic Mrs. Miniver from 1942, featuring a phenomenal Greer Garson in a story of a British family trying to survive during the war. It will leave you moved but inspired, and you'll see why it won 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Now for the best mind-expanding celebrity documentary, Liz Taylor, The Lost Tapes. HBO documentary films revolutionized the genre, making the current mess being made of the HBO brand an even sadder story. This is the kind of celebrity gossip doc I usually skip, especially when it's a subject telling their story in their own words, but I felt my mind expand as I watched and learned about someone whose story we all assume we know well because of her ubiquity in Hollywood. To learn about how someone who was crafted within the old studio system and had to work tirelessly to assemble and assert her own identity, and what an identity it was fascinating and revealing. At one point we hear Taylor say, "I liked a man who could dominate me." This line shattered my presumptions about her and invited me to be open to her story and her words. Quite a woman. Ms. Taylor has many great films in her filmography, but it's Cat on a Hot Tin Roof from 1958 that offers a tender performance. During the production, Taylor learned her husband at the time, Mike Todd, had died in a plane crash. She continues in her role and finishes the film, offering a glimpse of the steel resolve this lifetime performer mustered and carried with her through her illustrious career. And now, the best Everyone is a Person story, Anora. There's been a lot of buzz, but I think it's earned it. It's standout filmmaking, and it's different than all the other entries this year. Everyone is a person in Sean Baker's Tough Times misadventure, from the stripper at the center to the goon on the side. And as with A Different Man garnering buzz for supporting stars, the supporting star of this picture, Yuri Borisov, has won that round. But turn your gaze to Mark Edelstein as the insufferable Vanya, and there's a lot of nuance to enjoy there too. The jittering, quirks, the base immaturity, and whatever awards Mikey Madison garners for her turn as a girl who's game for a game, but not to be easily dismissed, she has earned. Her best line, 15, cash, up front. Pros don't mince words. For a more classic look at marginal, quirky characters that aren't often the star of their own stories, check out one of the Academy's Best Picture winners that most people have never seen, Marty, from 1955, starring Ernest Borgnine and Betsy Blair. Like Anora, it's about folks on the margin we don't really think about. A butcher and a school teacher, neither beautiful, but both real people, and a reminder that there are plenty of stories to discover, if the camera only gives them a chance. And now, for the best what the fuck is happening surprises, a film called Femme. Technically released in December 2023, this British indie gained cult appreciation in the 2024 calendar year for its bold premise and killer performances by its two leads. In contemporary London, a drag performer is attacked and injured by a tattooed punk, and then they become enemies with benefits. Fans of the show of the season Black Doves will have to look hard to recognize Nathan Stewart Jarrett as the drag performer, alongside George McKay in a stark departure from 2017 as the punk. Twisty and tingly, its tension was followed up wonderfully in this year's Baby Girl, in which a McKay lookalike, Harris Dickinson, plays an intern who brings his best against Nicole Kidman's CEO. Both ask the same question: what is behind the dark curtains of risk? See this one first. This is a tale for the queer and the curious that doesn't disappoint. If stories about romances that are very bad ideas are your thing, then consider one of the all-time film noir classics from 1944, legendary director Billy Wilder's Double Indemnity, starring a sizzling Barbara Stanwyck, a slithering Fred McMurray, and an oddly subtle Edward G. Robinson, about a doomed affair between a married woman and an insurance salesman that goes very wrong very quickly. After the assault on the senses from Femme, it's a nice bridge back to a classic that will feel light as air in comparison. Next up, Best Pretzel, Strange Darling. This is a film that trades on noir tropes and cliches. The garish neon motel sign, the offbeat country couple in the remote house, the femme fatale, but they are fucked with in satisfying ways in this indie thriller. Some of us discovered this 2024 entry from the news that actor Giovanni Ribisi was holding the camera, and we're treated to many great shots and sequences in this story that involves a one-night stand, a serial killer, and more twists than you'll find at Auntie Anne's. Both leads, Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gallner, are well suited for the pulpy tale of hopeless violence on the edge of society. Ed Begley Jr. and Barbara Hershey play a country couple they encounter and help complete director J.T. Molnar's odd, sour story, like a jawbreaker that you just know will be a trip to the dentist. For another story of a killer in the country, if you've never seen 1955's The Night of the Hunter, featuring Robert Mitchum as a smooth-talking pastor and possibly more, it's worth it. It's director Charles Laughton's gripping and unusual story of a couple of kids on the run. It's a totally different tone and experience, but the slick production design in lush black and white is a nice palate cleanser after the colorful gore of Strange Darling. Best Capturing of a Remote and Beautiful World, Gaucho Gaucho. In 2020, a small indie called The Truffle Hunters came out. It was by verite documentary filmmakers Michael Dweck and Gregory Kershaw, And for their new film, they traveled for days in the high Pampas region of northern Argentina to reach and capture the vanishing way of life of the Gauchos, or Gaucho Gaucho, the way a young character in the film exclaims. Horses, cattle, rodeos, agriculture, wine. These are the traditions of the women and men that populate this world that seems galaxies away from our own. Dweck is a fine art photographer, and every frame is composed as a portrait. The kind of film that places a calm hand on your heart, reminding you that your world is only that, and there are many cultures on this planet, filled with beauty and simplicity, all their own. And although it's by the exact same filmmakers, and we just mentioned it, The Truffle Hunters is the perfect companion piece to Gaucho Gaucho. It's a great anecdote to the news cycle, and a conversation between a truffle hunter and his loyal canine will warm your racing heart. We hope you enjoy these 2024 favorites and look forward to seeing which the Academy will recognize at the Oscars on March 2nd. Until then, I'm Joe Cooper, and this is Parallels in Pictures. Thanks for watching.